Hi, I'm Remington Aidney Campbell, and this is the History of Musical Theatre podcast. Today I have on as a guest, David Weston.
Hello, glad to be here.
I'm really excited to have you. I got in touch with your publisher as like a kind of long shot interview. I was like, how cool would it be if David would talk to me? So I'm very excited to have you.
Pleased to be here.
So this season of the podcast is talking about Les Mis, which you might seem like a bit of an odd guest for that, but it was produced at the Royal Shakespeare Company and directed by Trevor Nunn, and those are two people / organizations that you've worked with a bit. Can you tell me about your kind of experiences with the Royal Shakespeare Company?
Yes, they go back a long way, right back to 1967. This when I joined for the first time. It was in the early years, a few years after Peter Hall had founded it, and it was completely different in those days. Exciting because seemed like a whole new world was opening in the theatre. We had the National Theatre opening in London with Laurence Olivier, and you had the Royal Shakespeare Company at Stratford. These two huge organisations, and it seemed that the world was going to be great and fantastic. And that first season, the star of the season was Paul Scofield, who was a great actor who'd won the Oscar the year before for Man for All Seasons. And we did Macbeth. A few years ago, he'd done King Lear at the RSC, and he toured the world with it. It was a phenomenal success. He went on to make a film of it. I think he got an Oscar for that as well. Anyway, Macbeth is notoriously unlucky. And I'm a terribly unlucky play. And in fact, this was a disaster. You see, the theatre writing has gone wrong with designers. So they let the designers take over. This is an early example of these terrible heavy costumes. They wanted to look like leather, but they couldn't be leather. They were plastic, so you couldn't sweat. It was a hot summer. And the set was like a red carpet, which everybody tripped up over. Anyway, we did it at Stratford, and then we went to Russia with it, went to Moscow, Leningrad, Helsinki, and we were supposed to make a film of it, but that was never made. But I was in a wonderful production then that year of Romeo and Juliet with Ian Holm. So Ian Holm later again was a great Lear. And that was a fantastic production by a Greek director, Carlos Kuhn. Then Mike Leigh, have you heard of Mike Leigh? You know, the film director. He does all these improvised films. But anyway, he was there. We did an improvised play. Anyway, I was there for 2 years.
Yeah.
And then I went away for a bit. I did quite a few films in the 60s. And then before I went back to the theatre. I did the National in the interim, but then when I came back to Stratford, I think it was about 1993. It completely changed by then, and I did a Merchant of Venice, and by that time they were in modern plays as well. I played George V in a play about Elgar, but the atmosphere wasn't the same. It was you lost to that fire and evangelism of the early days. Unfortunately, in that early period, I never worked with Trevor Nunn. I left before Trevor. Well, Trevor was floating around as a young assistant director. I used to have drinks with him in the Dirty Duck, but I never worked with him until much later at the National. But when I went back to the RSC, I did a couple of years there. By that time, we had the Barbican. So you did the season at Stratford, then you came to the Barbican, and so I said, I didn't think Adrian Noble, I wasn't very impressed with Adrian Noble. For instance, Sir Robert Stevens, great actor, and he was playing King Lear, and he used to catch the bus every night after he'd done King Lear. He used to wait outside the Stratford Theatre, get a bus to Coventry, to get the late night train to London.
That sounds exhausting.
They never even later on a taxi for him to take him to the station. I don't know. At the same time, Adrian Noble, I hear, I'm not saying this is true, but I gather, was flying first class to New York. And the poor old actor, Sir Robert Stevens, he couldn't even get a taxi for him.
And he has a beast of a role.
Fun.
Like it's not like he was hanging out on stage all day doing nothing and then
No, exactly.
Like
no, exactly. Another example of the Royal Shakespeare Company. Robert Stevens was ill at the time. He didn't live very long after that. And a great friend of mine, Christopher Robbie, 6'6", great big guy, was his understudy. And 3 days before they opened, Robert Stevens had to go into hospital. So Christopher Robbie went on without any rehearsal and did it for 10 days until Robbie got better. Until Sir Robert Stevens got better. And then later on, they came to London, and again, he got ill. And Christopher Robbie played the final 3 weeks in London. Right? 2 years later, his agent put him up for a line of parts at the RSC. And the casting director said to his agent, "Can you please send us his CV?" This is a man who'd saved their bacon. He played King Lear without any rehearsal. Can you see, these people, these casting directors, they come and they go. And they, in the old days, there was no such thing as casting directors in the theatre. The directors knew what they wanted, and they went and saw plays. That doesn't happen anymore. Anyway, I'm going on like a crotchety old actor.
Well, apparently now I've heard that the casting directors don't have time to go see any plays anymore either.
No.
So they know their 80 people that they know.
Exactly. Or I gave a back when I was 75 10 years ago, and many young actors today, and they wait for their agent and say, "Oh, you make this is an audition." It's not an audition. They sit in front of a camera like I'm doing now, and they read it, and they do it. They've got no guarantee anybody's ever going to see it. It's terribly sad. It's terribly sad. I'm so glad neither of my sons became actors. But and going back to the RSC, then I did. It was supposed to be a wonderful tour of The Tempest. We were going to go to Japan and Korea, and it was a terrible production. It was an absolutely awful production, and it was so bad that the Japanese pulled out. The furthest east we got to Warsaw and East Germany, and then we came back and we toured the northeast of England. So that was and then I forgot what year it was, but they did all the Shakespeare plays in 1 year. And
cool,
I was in
easy thing to do.
Yeah. Different companies all the time. I was in Henry VIII, which we did in the church. That was wonderful. We did the actual Henry VIII in the church where Shakespeare's buried, and the atmosphere.
That is very cool.
Fantastic. And that was, I think that's one of the best things. That's about the best thing I ever did at the RSC.
Who did you play in Henry VIII?
I played the chorus and Lovat, I think it was one of the lords anyway. And then we had this young director, and I thought some of his ideas wouldn't work, but they seemed they did. One of his ideas was all the Anne Boleyn scene she should be. This says with her ladies in waiting. So he had all the lords, most of them had beards, dressed up in drag, being the ladies in waiting. But it didn't seem to mind. It didn't seem to matter. And then the final thing was I'd worked with Trevor then before at the National, and I heard he was doing this King Lear, and I rather fancied the tour. It was going all around the world, and so I said to Trevor, I wrote him a letter. Look, Trevor, I know I very much like to be in it. I played Kent at the young Vic, and I played Albany with Sir Anthony Quayle. So I thought I might either of those, but all he offered me was, he said, look, David, we'd love you to come, but can you understudy cover Ian as Lear, and there's the part of the gentleman. Now, the gentleman, in fact, has got more lines than a lot of other parts, because he's there all the time, but he's mainly called the gentleman. If he was called like Northumberland,
you could give him any name and it would seem like a better part.
But it was good in a way, because I was on stage the whole time with Ian. So then I knew exactly what he was doing. I was never worried about going on. Because personally, I think Lear is not a difficult part. Hamlet's a difficult part. Lear, any old man can do. Lear. If he's got the energy, because you've just got to feel it. You know, it's the emotions are so simple. Yeah. Anyway, then that was it. And Trevor was. See, the great thing about Trevor is every small little part in a production, he gives them a line through. He gives you what you're there for. So you're there for a reason. Every little character he does. And sometimes he's slow. Sometimes his productions go on too long. But I think he's a wonderful director. He still is. And apparently this recent production film of Cats, I haven't seen it, but it was a disaster. And he offered to come and help. They didn't ask him. He just loves directing. I think he'd direct somewhere in the toilet if they asked. I'm a great admirer.
Yes, he seems like someone. My grandfather attempted to retire and then got bored and went back to work. And that's the sense that I get from Trevor Nunn. He'd be like, I'm done. One more.
I remember I worked with Richard Burton, in my mind, one of the greatest actors ever. And towards the end of his career, he was being interviewed by a young woman on television. And she said to him, Mr. Burton, why is it that you make so many bad films? Oh, my dear, you've got to have somewhere to go in the morning.
And it's true.
True. So, and then you've read my book.
Yes, I've read both of them.
Yeah. So, and that the book came in by chance. Somebody said to me, "You should write a diary." And as it began on the 1st of January, and I knew what was going to happen to the year, I thought I'd start it. But I never thought I'd finish it. I thought I'd give up after a couple of weeks, like one normally does. But I was sending it online to a few friends, and keep it going, and that's how it came about.
Yeah. So interestingly, I read your books. I read Covering Shakespeare first. Because I, at maybe 14 or 15, got to the point where I just wanted to know everything that I could know about Shakespeare, an ambitious task for a small 14-year-old. So I had this kind of, I'd go to the library and I'd read the books that were there. And then I think I read yours through this like online book service. I was like, all right, Covering Shakespeare sounds great. And it's become one of those, it sits on my shelf, and whenever I'm getting ready to go to a new play, it's one of the ones that I get out and I'm like, okay, what does this book say about
as you like
I'm doing at the moment? Othello is what I'm doing at the moment. And read it and see if there's anything there that I'm like, oh, cool, I can take that. So I have a couple of books like that, and that's yours is one of them.
Good. I'm very flattered.
Yeah, I loved your summary of Pericles. During all the lockdowns, I actually was in a streamed production of Pericles, which we all filmed it in our homes. And because I did chorus roles, I probably could tell you scene by scene what happens all the way through Pericles, because I was the same as being the gentleman. I was in virtually every scene. Yeah, but
Okay.
I'm not gonna give a scene by scene breakdown of Pericles.
You remember that I was never in Pericles, but when I was at the Royal Academy, I was on the crew, and I got distracted by the ladies down below and forgot to pull the curtains. So what else do you want to ask?
I had some questions. What is your favorite role you've ever done? What's the number one Shakespeare role?
In comedy, must be Falstaff.
Mhm.
Because I played him in all the three Shakespeare plays that he's in, and then I think I put it in the book. There's a marvelous novel by a man called Robert Nye, 400-page novel, which Falstaff on his deathbed tells the true story of his life, not what Shakespeare, but the true story. Because he really was. He didn't die when Shakespeare has him die. He was at the Battle of Agincourt, and he personally was the key point in the victory. And he talks about the size of his member. So she has this huge member, and it's very bawdy, but it's very moving as well. Anyway, when I was at Stratford, at the end of every season, I don't know if they still do it, everything called the Other Play Festival, and actors can submit something they want to do.
Yeah.
And I'd always thought this would be a wonderful one-man show. It had been done once before in the West End,
but not very well. So you had to.
Yeah. So anyway, you have all the resources of the RSC for them, if they accept it. So I had a wonderful set and a wonderful director, and everybody liked it. The author came and said it was the best he'd ever seen it done. And for the next 2 years, I did it over 120 times. I did it twice in America. I did the Edinburgh Festival. I did it at various schools and nearly all the off Broadway in London, the pubs in London. But I had Sir Robert Stevens' costume.
Okay.
You see, normally when you play Falstaff, you're only on for about 10 minutes and you go up and you cool down. But I was on solidly for an hour and a half, and you sweat terribly. And this padding that I put, it was toxic. And my wife used to get so fed up with it, And one day we were on our way to the cleaners to have it cleaned, and she said, "You're not doing this anymore. I refuse to let you do this anymore." And she stopped the car. She opened the boot, and we were just passing a rubbish skip, and into the skip she threw Sir Robert Stevens' padding and my costume into the skip. And I've never done it again. So that was, but my favorite non-comic is Mark Antony.
Yeah.
It's not the biggest part, but it's a wonderful part. And I personally think one of the best Shakespeare performances on screen you'll ever see is Marlon Brando. You ever see it's a black and white film that MGM made in the 50s, and they had all these costumes set over them, big epic Quo Vadis. They did it very quickly, but you've got James Mason, wonderful actor as Brutus, Sir John Gielgud as Cassius, and Bob Brandon, absolutely superb as Mark Antony. And Antony's that is the part.
Yeah.
But if I could ever play one more part again, serious part of it, Mark Antony.
That's very cool. Julius Caesar is not a play that I was super familiar with. And I'm still not, although I did some scenes from it I spent my weekend at a 3-day Shakespeare intensive, led by John Bell.
I know John.
Yeah. I met John.
I haven't seen him since 1967, because he was in his production of Macbeth. He played Lennox.
And I haven't seen him since Sunday.
But you're going to see him Sunday?
I haven't seen him since Sunday.
Oh, but when you see him again, give him my love.
I will. I'll pass that on.
Yeah. Most of that company are dead. He's one of the few still alive.
I mean, there's a lot of people who you talk about who you now need to put sir in front of their name, which is quite impressive.
Yes. Well, in that crowd, it was Dame Helen Mirren.
Yeah.
They weren't actually in Macbeth, but they were that season. There was Ben Kingsley and Patrick Stewart. Ian Holm, who was already a leading actor.
Yeah.
There was a funny bit in of business. Helen was playing like a wench, a Roman wench or a Volsky wench, and there's a scene in when the Romans attack Volsky or the Volsky. Anyway, there's a scene, and it's supposed to be soldiers looting, and one says, "This will I carry to Rome," holding a piece of silver. Someone says, "And I this." Well, in this he pulled on Helen Mirren over his shoulders. I said, "This will I carry to Rome, and I this," with Helen Mirren over his shoulder and smacked the bottom. But you could do that. But that was true. It was very good bit of inventive acting.
I mean, it's pretty funny, and it's even funnier in hindsight. Now that she's Dame Helen Mirren.
Yeah. Oh yes, yeah. I you see, I was a founder member of the National Youth Theatre, and Helen Mirren joined it. I just as I'd left, Helen Mirren joined.
Yeah.
I used to know quite well. I haven't seen her for many years now. I think she's a great actress. I think Helen is a great actress. Anything else?
A couple of other questions. I'd love to hear what your advice to the young Shakespeare actor is. Aside from don't do it, go get a real job.
The most important thing are the words.
Yeah.
Shakespeare's words. I mean, the plots, it's like really extraordinary about the plots. But the words that are important. And so many young actors today, they don't project them. Like when I was at the Royal Academy, we had been bombed in the war. They just restored it, the Vanbrugh Theatre. It was a big theatre, and you did your final productions in a big theatre.
Yeah.
Play to the back, right to the back wall. They've got rid of that now. There's lots of they've got about 3 small theatres.
Yeah.
And okay, most actors now, I suppose, do it on television and films. They don't use the big theatres. I personally now like going in to see the small theatres and the pub theatres. Not for Shakespeare, but you can see and you can hear. But if you're on the stage, a big stage, you must project and you must speak the words and you must watch your diction. I've lost my name, I'm too old. But, I mean, and Hamlet's advice to the players: speak the speech I pray you as I pronounced it to you, trippingly on the tongue. And if you go read that speech, Shakespeare tells you how he wants his words done. And it is the words he wrote are wonderful, wonderful.
I mean, I would agree with that.
But you, I'm not saying you can't be inventive with Shakespeare. Like Trevor Nunn did this wonderful production of Merchant of Venice, and he set it in fascist Italy. And it worked perfectly. And when we did Troilus and Cressida, he did a thing that I'd always thought was a good idea. He made the Trojans were all black, and Greeks were white. So that makes perfect sense in casting. That makes perfect sense. Sometimes I know one shouldn't say it. But sometimes I find this, colorblind casting. I do find it a bit, because I'm an old fart, I suppose. I find it a bit confusing. Like I was in the Adrian Lester, wonderful black actor, Henry V at the National.
Yeah.
And so he's from the House of Lancaster. They're a new usurping house, have taken over the crown. So he has his brother and he has his uncle. So I don't know why they weren't black as well, because if he's black and his brother, my uncle, they're all white, it would have been much stronger if they'd all been black. The biggest laugh of the evening when somebody said, "And thy uncle, the famous Black Prince of Wales." That got a huge laugh.
Yeah, it definitely, I definitely can empathize with, like, you want families to look like,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
they're all related to each other.
Well, I mean, particularly as sometimes the cartoonists are so particular. They're so particular about certain things.
Mm.
Yeah. But anyway, it's a different world. It's a different world.
Yeah. So you spent very many years doing your show Falstaff. I have made a terrible decision and I'm doing a show at the Fringe Festival this year.
Yeah, good.
Where I'm going through the Shakespeare canon, and it's a cabaret, so there's some musical theatre in it. What's your advice for making a one-man show work?
Well, it's got to be quick. You got to have pace and energy,
Okay.
and variety. This Falstaff thing was an hour and 20 minutes. We had a sort of sad bit, funny bit, sad bit, funny bit, exciting bit, mixing it all up.
Yeah.
But see, one of my great regrets is I can't sing a note. I wish I could sing. You can sing. You're so lucky. So you can spice up your show with songs. What is your show about? By the way, I've lost your picture. I can't see you anymore.
Oh, I don't know why that happened. So my show is kind of, I'm sort of talking through the canon, talking a little bit about history, about church history, which is one of my kind of areas of interest, and then doing songs from musicals based on Shakespeare plays. Yes, so there's some West Side Story and a little bit of opera in there. And
wonderful.
Some,
are you doing any of Shakespeare's songs, actual songs? From the plays.
Yes, I'm doing one song that's taken, where the text is taken from the play. How Should I Your True Love Know, from Hamlet.
Yeah.
And
one of my, go on. Yep.
And then there's some other bits that are Shakespeare's text. So there's going to be a little bit of Dogberry and a little bit of Touchstone to show the difference in which clown was clowning at the time. Yeah, and then I've got a wonderful tenor working with me, and so we're going to do a highly condensed version of Richard and Anne from Richard III.
Oh, yes, sure.
Which is some cool, normal, non-creepy flirting with no dead bodies in the room. Yeah, because that scene is just insanely cool. And then I'll use some horror histories to keep track of where we are in the Kings. Yeah.
Great. My great friend David Warner.
Yeah.
One of the iconic productions of the RSC was the Wars of the Roses.
Yeah.
That production. Yeah. Well, David was a rider with me, but he went straight in to play Henry VI. He was a tall, gangling boy, with a spotty face. He was ideal. He was wonderful as Henry VI. But he died last week, and somebody on Facebook mistook him for me. and this thing came up. Sad to hear the loss of David Weston. He was a true friend. Gave me my always encouragement. I deepest sympathy to him and his family. So I look back. Thank you very much for your kind obituary. However, I'm still here.
Unfortunately, I'm not scheduled to die for a little while yet.
Yeah, I think Mark Twain said reports of my death are grossly exaggerated. But I was going to send that round, but he obviously realized his mistake and took it down straight away. That was David. I'm going to David's funeral next week, actually. He was a wonderful actor. And then he did some amazing films people don't realize. He did 3 films for Sam Peckinpah, the great Western director, who has diverse. And
I feel like I've got a list of films I have to see now.
I wish you all the luck with your show. Were you doing it?
I'm doing it in a school hall as part of the Sydney Fringe Festival.
Yeah. Yes, I did Falstaff in many schools.
Yeah.
We'll hope it goes well.
Yeah, I think that's all my questions. Thank you so much for chatting with me.
It's a pleasure. Been a pleasure. Sorry I can't see you anymore. Anyway, if you want anything you want to know, you can always send me an email.
That would be amazing. Thank you.
Okay.
All right.
All the best. All the very best.
You too. Bye.
Bye-bye.